2011, the state of Ohio sold Lake Erie Correctional Institution to Corrections Corporation of America, the nation's largest for-profit prison operator, for $72 million. It was the first state prison in the nation to be sold to a for-profit company. How have things been going?
My name is Ralph Mackey. I live in North Olmsted, Ohio, with my wife Karen, and I have two sons, Ryan, age 24, and Jeffrey, age 21. My relationship to Lake Erie Correctional Institute is that of a parent of an inmate.
My name is Kimberly Knopfsinger, and I live south of Canton in Magnolia, Ohio, and I am affiliated with Lake Erie Correctional Institution because I have a loved one that is in there. We've been together 13 years. We have 2 children together.
He was incarcerated due to convictions for drug trafficking, and he will be spending 2.5 to 3 years in this state-run facility, or what was previously a state-run facility, which is now managed and owned by Corrections Corporation of America, a private sector prison operator.
Ben has an addiction that he's been struggling with for a number of years. And one of the things that he was doing because he was unemployed was trying to get money to pay for his addiction. So he began going into homes and trying to get things to make money, credit cards and such. When I found out about Lake Erie online, I read all of those things, and Ben had already told me it was the one place he didn't want to go. And I didn't tell him anything I read online, and his letter said everything that the newspapers had said about it. He was saying that there were drugs everywhere. You could get crack, you could get heroin, you could get pot. They were making hooch, and he said there were cell phones everywhere, and there was so much violence.
If we have the ability as a state and as a society to arrest, convict, and incarcerate one of our citizens, where is the responsibility for taking proper care of that individual then? The bottom line is we are failing.
Ohio is located on Lake Erie, at the northeastern tip of the state, just west of the Pennsylvania border. Lake Erie Correctional Institution sits 1 mile east of downtown Conneaut. Under the terms of the sale, the new owner, Corrections Corporation of America, was no longer responsible for policing the prison's outer perimeter. Ohio transferred that responsibility to the local municipality of Conneaut.
We very first heard that we might have to come up with the security and the outer perimeter patrol shortly thereafter after the sale. When it was a state-run prison, the State Highway Patrol did it. After that, it's in a municipality, and it's in our municipality, therefore it's our job to take care of it. It took a lot of fighting and a lot of screaming and a lot of begging to make sure that that wasn't going to happen, because like I said, with our budget here, everybody knows, I mean, what the governor's taken away from us already in local government funds. Our police force could not handle that kind of responsibility.
In the first year, the city responded to almost 4 times as many prison-related calls as the previous 5 years combined. Serious concerns over the safety of his municipality led Mr. LaRouche to write a letter to Governor John Kasich.
I begged him for help. I mean, that was the main goal, was just to make sure that he knew what his decision to sell that prison was going to do to our city. I know what he was trying to do for the state. I'm glad he saved a few dollars and put it back into the budget. But when it comes to the safety and security of my citizens, he was taking that away from them. This prison grew by 300 in the first couple months. We took a tour of the prison shortly after the sale, and they were doubling bunks and they were getting ready for this huge influx of people. And right then you can see that there's obviously going to be a problem with the limited number of corrections officers that you have out there compared with this huge and growing number of inmates that you have. So did we think it was going to be a problem? Absolutely. And with the riots and with the fights and everything that's been happening in the past, it seems like it's something that they underestimated a bit.
When CCA took over, they had this we know better than everybody else attitude, this very condescending way of talking to people. They thought that they just do everything, and those of us that had been there for years didn't know anything. They basically said, we own this, we don't care what Ohio has to say about it.
A lot of those people who worked at that prison were let go. They were said, well, you know, we'll give you the opportunity to reapply for your job. Well, if you were in the union for a long time and you were there for a long time and looking to make a big wage, I'm sorry, but we're hiring some guy off the street to take your job.
Drugs and contraband inside the facility increased dramatically, with reports of it being thrown over the perimeter fence by the duffel bag for prisoners on the inside.
When Ryan first arrived at Lake Erie Correctional Institute, he described the facility as totally unlike anything he could have imagined.
You had inmates constantly high, constantly intoxicated. When you have that in a facility like that, people, they don't care. I mean, they're already going to act up. You know, you put somebody who's intoxicated, they're certainly going to act up even more.
He said that drugs were routinely available within the prison. Anything that's available outside of the prison would be available also inside the prison.
On a daily basis, he's asked if he wants to get high, if he wants to use something. He said it's surrounding him, it's everywhere.
We had a lot less security personnel doing what they needed to do in terms of pat downs, searches. We had a lot of stuff coming out of maintenance and the OPI department where they did a lot of the recycling. We had DVD players this big, you know, that thick, getting snuck out. That shows that somebody's not even doing a pat down.
He deserves to be in a setting of that nature, and I understand that he needs to pay for his crime, but when you have an addiction, the last thing that you need to be having in your life is to be surrounded with that.
One of my favorite quotes from CCA was like, I'm not aware of any drug problems we have here. I'm like, you've got duffel bags coming over the fence. I don't see how you can have such a drastic increase, and I'm saying huge increase in drugs coming through there without some serious internal problems.
Violence inside the prison skyrocketed.
When NTC was there, if we saw a fight, our job was to go in and break the fight up. We actually had a fight breakup technique that we were taught through ODRC. When CCA came in, they said, no touching, you don't touch the inmates, you don't break up the fight, you let them sit there and fight. And we're all kind of like, so what, one of them gets killed, then I get sued for being there? CCA wanted us to use chemical munitions, OC spray. I was certified with it, they never gave it to me. Lots of people who were certified with it didn't have it. There was a very slow transition to being able to respond to things. Basically, you were scared to break up a fight because you didn't know what was going to happen. Within 3 months, those inmates knew that we couldn't do anything because we were afraid to lose our jobs. Officers were punished for doing their jobs under ODRC. So once those inmates realized we couldn't do that, they totally took control of that prison.
So we're dealing with a situation where, you know, if it's called an anarchy, an absence of the rule of law, that's the prison. That's the prison that doesn't have adequate resources. And why, you ask, that they don't have adequate resources? I think it's only attributable to one thing. That's called profit.
You can only cut so many things before the security starts to diminish. And I think that's probably where they got caught with their pants down a little bit.
In order to reduce operational costs and satisfy shareholders, Many rehabilitation programs were slashed or cut entirely.
Pretty much the entire schooling system we had there was shut down. A lot of programs were not available to them, I believe because of cost. I also believe because of incompetence, that they didn't know how to run it, but they thought they did, and they didn't want to take anybody's advice on how to run it.
Ryan signed up for a course in computer repair. They sit in front of a computer screen and play computer games. There is absolutely no instruction on computer repair, and yet they're being paid to provide this education to inmates, to help them prepare for a possible career on the outside.
Kent State used to work there with them under MTC, but for whatever reasons there was a falling out between CCA and Kent State.
So I called Kent State University in Ashtabula and asked them why it was they were not providing instruction at the Lake Erie Correctional Institute. And they said that the prison officials there decided to terminate the contract.
I think that they want to spend as little as possible on the actual rehabilitation of an inmate, on the things that they need, because it affects their bottom line.
The more you put in, the less you get out. So if they have to provide all of these different programs and all of these different things for all of these different individuals, they're going to make less and less money. They are not there to give a crap about you or your friends or anybody else who is in that prison. They are there to make sure that their shareholders are happy at the end of the day.
Since 2009, CCA's stock price has risen more than 400%, from $10 to over $40 per share.
The cost-cutting measures they try to make affect the prisoners in a negative way. Less programs, less time, less resources. And if you have an institution that is meant to rehabilitate or correct, those are the things that should not be cut. At this rate, Ben is going to come back out no further along than the day he was sent in there.
If more prisoners equals more profits, why would Corrections Corporation of America want to rehabilitate prisoners at all?
People are going to get caught for doing things, and they're going to get in prison for doing things because that's how the current justice system is set up, and we send them away, and they're supposed to be in a place where they can get help for some of those issues. And I think as a citizen, you expect that. I think you really want to believe that that's what's happening behind those walls. But in a sense, they're turning these people loose. They're letting them go into free society, and how are they supposed to make a living? How are they supposed to do the things? They've learned probably to be better criminals in prison than what they were when they went in. It doesn't seem like the experiment has worked.
Corrections Corporation of America is reimbursed on a per diem basis for every prisoner they maintain. This is like keeping a warehouse of people. Every bed day is billed at a certain per diem rate. So why would there be any incentive to grant anybody a request to transfer to a state facility? Or why would there be any incentive to recognize, good and proper behavior by any inmate if it would gain him early release?
You're in the business to make a profit. Do you want those people rehabilitated? I would hope as a human being, you want those people to be rehabilitated. As a profiting entity, as a business, I think you're going to take as many bad people as you can get, because that's where your money's coming from. So I think it's a definite conflict of interest, I would say, when it comes down to a private entity owned prison, when their regards are different for what the prison is supposed to do as a whole.
We had a medical department there, and they usually made decisions. It started to get to the point where some of the upper management were questioning those decisions, whether we needed to take somebody out or not. I personally believe it was, do we need to send this person out because of the cost? And that's the feeling I got listening to the way they were questioned in the medical department. I saw inmates severely neglected. There was a very big problem in the beginning with medication not being there. MTC had a computer system set up and everything was monitored that way. That immediately went out the door, and I want to say for the first couple of weeks there were several inmates who went without much needed medication, not just your run-of-the-mill medication. We're talking blood pressure medication, psych medication.
In February of 2013, a scathing inspection by Ohio's Correctional Institution Inspection Committee revealed that the staff lacked control of the prisoners. Policies and procedures were inconsistently followed. Officers avoided confrontation, and a high rate of prisoner idleness was observed.
When CCA comes in and they have multi-million-dollar, backing, you would expect that they would come in and they would know what they were doing. That didn't prove to be the case the first, year or so.
CCA owned the facility and the grounds, but the state still owned the inmates. There was a lot of confusion. We never knew who to ask, and one of the biggest things is we had, 7 head management, and they're all telling us different things. We were talking about how hot it's going to get in the summer, and CCA said, well, why don't you just turn on the air conditioning in the dorms? They don't have air conditioning. How do you spend that much money on a facility and not know some of the basics, that directly affect your inmates and their attitudes? It gets hot in those dorms in the summertime, and when people get hot, they get angry. Our head maintenance director, he quit in a very short time. Complaints that he wasn't able to get the parts he needed, things to keep the facility running. We constantly had bathroom facilities that were 2 and 3 toilets down out of 5, sinks constantly not working. They had inmates sleeping on floors. They had three inmates to a 2-bunk cell. There's not much room for 2 inmates in those cells, let alone 3. It's my understanding that they were having to use plastic bags to go to the bathroom in and things like that. My personal belief on why things weren't fixed or repaired was it was too expensive.
More than a year after the takeover, and after a slew of damaging articles in the local and national press, Corrections Corporation of America began to work with city officials to make changes.
They said it was growing pains, it was to be expected. My biggest thing is, as we're sitting there for the meeting, we get through this part of, here's our 9-point plan of what we're going to do. We're going to increase security. We're going to put up more cameras. We're going to put up more lights. We're going to increase fence size. We're going to put up razor wire. But you know what? We're going to have to wait till our next funding cycle to do that. And that blew my lid. That was it. My citizens here aren't going to wait for your next funding cycle for you to provide security and adequate security for your prison that you're making millions of dollars on.
Did Ohio make the right decision? Was it wise to take the short-term financial gain at the expense of the long-term safety of the citizens of Conneaut and the rehabilitation of our prisoners?
If you're going to go through the process and pad the pockets of the state government with this kind of sale, then you need to make sure that there are safeguards in place. And when this very first happened, that wasn't done. That was not done. I think they just thought that it was going to sell. CCA was going to come in. It was going to be a seamless takeover. They've done it before, so why wouldn't it happen? Well, it didn't happen here, and that's kind of where we're at.
The most shocking thing that I've seen in the articles and the crime rates that have risen since this institution has become privatized, all of those things are shocking to me. I saw something like 238% the crime rate rose in that area and within the prison since this privatized institution took over. What appalled me even more is when you get on Lake Erie's website that they just got accredited again. The fact that there is a company or a business or an entity or an individual that is making any sort of profit off of Ben's misfortune, his addiction, his crime that he committed because of that, disgusts me.
I think it's only attributable to one thing. That's called profit. And that kind of profit, I would say, is not the American way of doing things. But somebody else is trying to tell us that it is.
I see it as a company that's looking at its bottom line, and when anything looks at its bottom line, that's all they care about.
The profit is derived from shorting all kinds of services and cutting back on a number of personnel assigned to that facility. Now, if you want to call that a savings to the taxpayer, so be it. But the idea or the notion that making profit at the expense of prisoners and their families is pretty disgusting to me.
If you're looking at dealing with the overall of it. And whether I as an individual believe that we should be treating inmates as cattle and selling them and buying them and making sure that our prison is full of as many people as we can cram into a little space so we can make the most amount of money that we possibly can, there's something seriously wrong with that. People are people. They're in there, they're paying their debts to society regardless of what they did. Should they be a bargaining chip? Should they be used as profit? Should they be seen as dollar signs? I think when we as a community and as a nation have come to that point, something has went seriously wrong.
You can help to stop the privatization of Ohio prisons. Legislation is pending that will hold for-profit prisons accountable. Demand action from your legislators. For more information, visit acluohio.org/prisonsforprofit.